So we have a good agenda today. It's a little bit, a few updates as well as sort of a bit of a town hall discussion. So welcome to our colleague from the CRG department, Vuyiseka Dubula, the new head of the department. I think I met you in November when you were just getting started in Geneva in your role, and now that you've had a few more months in the work, I know that you're here today to present a few different updates to us around the CRG Ready, changes to the department structure and team, as well as sort of your department priorities and a bit more information around the new learning hubs, I think is what they're called. So we're looking forward to that update from you, and that's sort of the main portion of our call. And then we will move on to a bit of an update after some interesting developments in the last week or 10 days around the pandemic accord, some of the timeline extension, and I'm told some very interesting ideas around a financing tool or a financing mechanism. And then we have one of our speakers, Dumi, who's joining us to speak to us a little bit about their new podcast series and some of the conversations that they're having there in a way to share that with all of you. So I think we'll just get started with our agenda now, Conte, unless I'm missing anything else. But Vuyiseka, welcome. It's lovely to have you here on a GFAN call, and we look forward to having many more conversations with you over the months and years to come. But welcome, thank you for making the time, and pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kati, for the invitation, first of all. I'm going to have a hard stop at 2:35. I'm at the airport, so there's a bit of noise background. Apologies in advance for that. I hope I'm audible. Okay, so I'm going to start first by, I hope, Kevin, is anyone projecting? Quentin, do you have the slides?
No, I don't have the slides, but
just give me a second. I'll project.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Kevin. So I'll go straight to slide 2. So the starting point that I want to update you on, and I'm sure some of you are very aware of the changes in the Global Fund Strategy 2023 to 2025 that really puts communities at the center. But it's not just to name and say communities at the center, but there had to be shifts within the Global Fund to allow communities to be at the center. And that also means that resourcing and supporting communities in a different way, but also intensifying support to grants to ensure that they deliver for communities. Because it's not just enough to just say communities at the center in the strategy. So there are 3 things that changed to allow a process where communities could be at the center. And I'm only going to be speaking about the CRG department. And I know that there could also be some of the overlap of our work with the PCSA department in external relations. So the first thing that had to change in this strategy, one was to also ask CRG to lead on 3 things. If you look at the slide 2, there's an area highlighted in blue. The first thing is CRG to lead on the systematic approach to supporting community, to supporting development and integration of community systems for health. And the second one is ensuring that the stronger voice of communities living and affected by HIV, TB, and malaria in the countries where the Global Fund is investing. The third piece is to intensify how we are addressing inequities driven by human rights and gender-related barriers. Those are the 3 things that we are expected as CRG to lead, to at least put an action to the commitment of putting communities at the center. At the same time, we must acknowledge that the resources that follows this commitment have not been adequate. So CRG is not fully resourced to deliver on those 3 things. Because we are not fully resourced to deliver on the ambition, there are certain things that may not be achieved at the same level that we are expected by communities to achieve as CRG. And I think some of you have been tracking the resources going to community-led organizations, Some of us have been tracking the investments through the strategic investment, catalytic investments. And those are some of the areas of looking at what are the ways in which the money follows the top. But I want to say it upfront that we don't have adequate resources to deliver on these three buckets of ambitions that were expected to support the strategy and be implemented to deliver on this ambition. What did we do?
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Because what we're seeing right now is Gavin
It's different.
Yeah, Gavin's making some minor adjustments, it looks like, to later on in the PowerPoint. But Gavin, if you could go back to the slides, that would be great. Because right now we're
If
seeing.
I could also be given rights to present, I can present and then go to Gavin for the last slide. Can I do that? Apologies for this.
Yeah, that's fine. You just need Gavin need to stop sharing.
Gavin?
Oh.
Are we ready? Okay.
Go ahead, you can share.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, and then I must put it on slideshow. You can see it hopefully. All right, all good. All right, so acknowledging all what I've said, that we are not adequately resourced, but we did get some resources. And with the resources that we got, what were we able to do? So what we did in the new strategy, we reorganized ourselves. We called it fancy CRG Ready. And I'm sure many of you have heard this CRG revitalization, CRG this. We seem to be evolving from something like that, but we are not fully ready. But within this project, we were able to at least use 5 strategic levers that should at least inform how should we structure ourselves in a way that we can deliver within the resources that we have. So the first thing that we did was to dedicate some support dedicated to GMD, particularly aiming to ensure that we can step up our support for implementation at regional and country level through the grant cycle. Investment support focus on GMD, embedded, but also being part and parcel of the country teams. And of course, we don't have 120 people or 180 people. We have people who are also working at regional level, responsible for multiple countries, not just one country, as is the model for GMD. For CRG, we are adding CRG-related priorities in that region, but using an embedded approach. That's how we are doing the dedicated investment support. Also, we got 3 positions for the investment support. We also got 7 positions to support and enhance our thought leadership and policy engagement across the thematic areas within CRG, but also that can service the whole of the Secretariat. And this is made up of very senior technical advisors who are assisting us to leverage up-to-date guidance and advice, working in collaboration with investment support advisors who are embedded in GMD. So they are also there to troubleshoot, unlock bottlenecks where there's an issue in a particular region if they are not having all the necessary tools and resources at the time. People like Gavin, for example, are there as a backstop to assist and support as and when needed immediately at the time when there's a bottleneck. But systematically also influencing and supporting and shaping, enhancing what those thematic advisors are doing, or thematic advisors embedded in GMD, also constantly checking in with them if there are issues in a country, if maybe we need new tools or new thinking. The third piece is also elevating our purpose-driven approaches to partnership. That our partnerships, for example, in countries, in engaging as you know, we have a global poly crisis, and our partnerships in collaboration, also making sure that our partnerships are driven by purpose, which is delivering on all the 3 key things that CRG must deliver on, and acknowledging that we can't do that alone as CRG and only just as the Global Fund. Who else is in the ecosystem that we need to influence, and how are we influencing them? So we've been taking conscious and mindful steps in building and expanding our partnerships to ensure that our thought engagement and purposive collaboration with other partners is not just only with the usual suspect, moving away not just to only those that we've been engaging with in the past. In this case, I'm not talking just about our technical partners, our bilateral partners, but also moving into spaces such as climate crisis because of the overlapping issues around malaria communities, issues around disruption in services and community systems. So that is why we are being intentional in that purpose, in driving our partnership through a particular purpose and elevating it, not just for us to be satisfied with only the ones that we have. That also requires then, as we needed to speak to each other and make connections, not all of us to speak to the same partner. How do we really make sure that we make the best use of the partnerships by ensuring when we go to partners, we are all aligned in what we are asking those partners to do and support us, not just the CRG, but across the secretariat. So if the same partner is working with the HIV department, we need to be aligned with the HIV department so that we don't send different messages and asking different things from our partners and exhausting them because we were asking for several meetings to discuss the same thing. The fourth key strategic lever in this capability that we are able to deliver with these new 10 positions is strengthening our approaches in measurement and monitoring what we are doing. So increasing our focus in measuring what are we doing through the KPIs, but also evaluations of the SIs. And this will give us data to see where we are doing well and where we are not doing well, but it also gives us data for what more needs to be done by this, but not just by CRG, but the whole secretariat. And I'm sure some of you have been asking us this question about where is the evidence that shows that we are supporting and investing in communities. This type of data will also inform us what do we need to advocate for internally within the secretariat in GC8 as a new focus where we do not have the data. If we do have the data, if it's not satisfactory, what else, how else should we monitor that data? How should we monitor certain things so that we are able to answer these questions for ourselves, to improve the way we are working, but also the way we are delivering the grant, but also to answer to communities when they're asking us these questions. The last thing that we are able to do through this structure is also improving our cross-collaboration within the Secretariat, building capability on all Secretariat members to also be fully conversant on CRG-related topics, but also to ensure that it's integrated in their way of working, in their way of advising country grants, but also in the country missions, so that when we are not there, our colleagues within the Secretariat are able to push and monitor progress on the CRG-related topics, even when we are not able to attend or support a particular country mission. That's the list that the structure is going to be able to help us to do. It's not everything, but it's taking us to the next level of what we should be as CRG, to be fully embedded in the way of working of the Global Fund, not just CRG as a standalone, and that the grants could have an inbuilt capability of delivering for CRG-related topics without us having to convince that there's going to be a shared responsibility and accountability for delivering for CRG-related topic areas, so that it's not just CRG pushing for it as if we are outsiders. Right, so the structure looks like this in broad strokes. In order for us to systematically support investment support, as I said, it's not just about being embedded, but a big part of it is being embedded, but it is also managing ourselves within CRG by clustering ourselves in a way that can also force us to be able to speak in a way that is integrated, in a way that we are able to develop thought leadership within CRG that is coherent, and we are also showing collaboration within CRG. Because we can't go in silos and ask the grant for human rights and something else for community engagement and another thing for human rights. We can't afford that because we don't have the human resource capacity to go on one issue at a time. So that also has allowed us to, in that clustering, to support each other in ensuring that the department thematic areas can be managed maximally, but we can also see where there's a wastage in terms of where we are duplicating efforts, where we are not maximizing efforts, where there are partners who are really good that we could also be maximizing our thought leadership, because we are now sitting together and working as a team. And we have separated the clusters into two. One, we've clustered gender, human rights, and health equity as one cluster. And another cluster is key populations, community engagement, and community systems and responses. Those two clusters are new in this structure, but at the same time, they are organized intentionally to build capability of those thematic leaders to speak to each other, but also to bring a higher level of advice to the investment support, but at the same time, high level thought leadership that will really put us at a level where we're not just doing it piecemeal, but we're doing it coordinated and we're collaborating with each other. Because there is so much demand, as you know, of thematic advice, as many countries are going into crisis mode because of the human rights and gender backlash. So we do need to also coordinate how we are going to be responding to that as a team rather than as an individual. Otherwise, we're going to be overburdened one team over them. Then we have the investment support. There we have 7 positions, as I said in the previous slide. In those 7 positions are directly supporting countries. Although they are housed at CRG, but they are full responsibilities to support countries. Then we have 3 embedded advisors who are in GMD, responsible, accountable to GMD, but have a dotted line to CRG. And those are the 3 embedded advisors that we are working very closely with together with our investment support team. So if you look at this structure, in a way, you could split it into 2. From the investment support team and the GMD embedded advisors, that's one team that works together, but that team cannot work without the thematic clusters because they are supported on daily basis by the thematic clusters on the technical advice, on thought leadership. When there's a crisis, the thematic advisors are there on call 24/7 to support the countries. So I want us to see it as a team that works together. That's why the clustering is so important to build that capability within CRG of working together. Okay, so that is what the structure looks in broad strokes is meant to do and deliver. This is how it looks like in terms of people. It looks like it's a lot. We will end up with about 35 team members without counting the ones that are embedded in CMD. Looks like a big team, but if you consider the ambition of what we are expected to deliver and support all investments of the Global Fund, it is nothing to what we are supposed to be in order for us to really bring deep support to grant making through the grant making process. But it is at least something that takes us to somewhere. And we are already seeing some of the opportunities and successes of what the beginnings of the embedded approach and working together as clusters is beginning to show. Of course, it's too early to say. We still have to work on a few things just to build a culture of that teamwork within the team because this is a new way of doing. So that is how it looks like now. I'm going to move to the CRG departmental priorities, just to give you a taste of what are we focusing on this year. And of course, there are Global Fund priorities, and then there are seed priorities that we are also feeding into, seed as in our division. So for CRG, the first seed level and high level priority is we must implement grants for maximum impact. That is what seed is expecting CRG to do this year. And how are we going to do it as CRG for this year? The first thing that we are committing ourselves to do is to scale up our approaches and programs that reflects key priorities, which is on gender, human rights, community systems and responses, to deliver services to key and vulnerable populations to at least attain health equity. And that requires us to provide timely and quality investment support in the areas of our 3 thematic areas that I've shared. And that means also we must respond to health challenges as and when they are emerging. For example, the human rights crisis requires us to deliver and implement a maximum grant. Also means that we must be responsive to crisis on the ground, be able to be agile enough when we are required to shift, for example, in Ghana and deliver maximum grant in a different way. We also play that role very well, and we are already in Ghana supporting Ghana with safety and security measures to protect implementers to ensure that the grants can be implemented in a maximum way as much as possible with limited disruption in services. But also we need to be systematic in how we are approaching a generation of evidence in how we are going to integrate community systems for health, because we know that many global health institutions are going through the replenishment this year, and some things are going to be deprioritized if we don't include in the GC7, GC8 new approach in ensuring that the evidence for integrating community systems for health is generated to also so that they can be absorbed and therefore financed. Because if we not get to a point where there's investment in community systems and responses, we might as well close shop, because post 2025, if we don't get that investment now, it's going to be harder to raise the resources, because now we are in the mode of looking for money, and we want to set priorities on what do we want to be funded. And one of those things is making sure that we have data and evidence that shows and proves this is how community systems can be delivered, and here is the evidence. The second priority for CRG is to develop and review global fund processes and policies that should progressively integrate CRG priorities across the grant cycle in all the operations and co-funding of co-funding model. And that means that we also have to assess and evaluate how effective are the changes in GC7 that we have seen, what needs to be expanded, what needs to be strengthened, and what needs to be integrated. For example, CLO funding. The second priority for CRG, which is linked to what happened, sorry. It is to strengthen organizational effectiveness and adaptability. And that means we must ensure that we can exert as much influence over the global fund processes and responses to ensure that when the external context changes, we are able to adapt and we are able to find ways to influence, but also ways to intervene to ensure that we are communities who are affected by climate crisis, who are affected by the changes in the future of the global health, for example, post-Lusaka agenda, that we are able to shift even conversations within the global fund that puts communities at the center, even at the time when the debate is hot within the global fund. How do we tactically engage in those conversations and influence those conversations in what that means if communities are not going to be sustained, because it will undermine the very same commitment of putting communities at the center. I've shared a lot about partnerships and expanding partnerships and ensuring that we are building effective and identifying which other partners we need to be working with, especially in the context of the backlash. Which other partners do we need to go out there and work with? For example, the feminist organizations. Do we need to engage with the feminist organizations? In what way are we going to be engaging with feminists in the context of what's happening? Because we need to be organized and be part of the organized movement as well in countering this backlash, because we have resources to counter it through ensuring continuity of services, but also ensuring that gender and human rights don't fall off on the agenda of the global fund, even if there's a pushback, even internally, which is not yet there, because we don't know what the future of global health means for the global fund. But we are vigilant in knowing that it could. And in anticipation of that, we in the expansion and thought of expanding our partners, we need to be thinking about which other partners we need to be already influencing or them influencing us. The fifth priority is ensuring that our roles and responsibilities across the functions of the global fund are clarified, because often there's misunderstanding of what CRG is about and what CRG is not about. For example, the embedded CRG Ready structure already began to help us to clarify those roles between us and GMD and across SEED. We are on a path of doing the same, that we are not yet fully understood. We also don't fully understand where are the areas of accountability with some of our colleagues in SEED. So it's work in progress, but the intent is to increase our alignment, but also increase accountability measures. When some things are not delivered in the way as intended, we need to also hold each other accountable as within the secretariat. But obviously, you can only do that if we have co-designed and the roles. We've also been clear on whose mandate is what to do what, so that we can all take the responsibilities for the areas that we are responsible. So I will probably end there because I don't want to spend too much time. Gavin, do you have the slide on learning hubs?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I
Okay.
can. I can. All right.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take these
Yeah.
3 forward?
Mhm.
Perfect. So if we go on to the next slide, just to let everyone know that we have 6 regional learning hubs. I think, Vu, you might have control of the slides if we can move on to the next one.
It's not moving.
Otherwise, let me share screen if it's
Let me
stuck.
stop. Let me stop. Okay.
Okay.
And Lou, I just point out there's I know you have to leave in a few minutes, so there is one question in the chat if you're able to respond to as Gavin gets the slides sorted here.
All right, Katie, tell me if you can see the Learning Hub slide.
We can see the presentation, not the slides yet.
Okay. Can you see who are the Learning Hubs?
Yes, we can.
You
Yeah.
can? Okay, so we have 6 regional learning hubs for LAC, Francophone Africa, Anglophone, Lusophone Africa, Asia Pacific, MENA, and ECA regions. Each of the hubs has a standardized set of activities, and they are currently going to be launching in the coming weeks needs assessments for each of the regions. So a great opportunity for GFAN members to provide feedback on what they would like to be seeing learning hubs covering in terms of intra-regional and inter-regional learning exchanges, but also information and learning that could be around civil society or key population CCM members. It could be thematic. So the whole host of array of everything that is Global Fund around implementation and engagement discussions. They are convening, each hub will convene a quarterly thematic learning session, and a number of these are currently being finalized. So they'll be in Latin America, they're going to be having a focus on safety and security. In Francophone Africa, it's going to be around accessing technical assistance. We have new hubs in MENA and Asia Pacific, so they will be conducting sessions to introduce themselves and using it as an opportunity to deepen the work of the needs assessments that are happening in the region. In addition, the learning hubs have resources to convene in-person learning forums. A lot of these learning forums, we know that one of the learning forums will be for preparation for GC8, but there's another learning forum to be defined. And obviously they will be working with bilateral, technical and other partners to see if we can find efficiencies and potentially convene additional meetings. They also have 36 newsletters to disseminate. So far, as of last week, they had disseminated 19 newsletters, and just recognizing that in MENA and Asia Pacific, the learning hubs are still very much in startup mode. Learning hubs play a critical role in generating and supporting communities to submit technical assistance requests. Those technical assistance requests are both directed at the community engagement SI, but also in supporting technical assistance requests to other mechanisms that provide TA to Global Fund, and are helping to really sort of broker that TA across technical and bilateral partners. And they have funding also to support direct engagement at country level. So quite often communities and civil society partners don't actually need TA. They need a small amount of resources to be able to do the engagement work themselves, or they might already have a community consultant within their community. So it's providing that sort of more agile, small investments. They also can provide some limited support for community participation in scientific events. It's not a big focus of the CESI because our resources would quickly dwindle if we were to support that, but it's to support some strategic engagement in scientific events related to community engagement and the Global Fund, and then to be developing some case studies. So that's a really quick skate through the regional learning hubs. We will circulate with the slides. You have the contact details for the learning hubs and how to locate their website and to also to sign on to their newsletters. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Gavin. So just, I know there's only a few moments, and just in the chat, there is some response for Nambasa's question, which was around, I guess how to head, what the plan was around from the Secretariat around heading off some of the very serious challenges for civil society communities around the homosexuality laws. Vu, did you want to address that orally as well, quickly before you have to go? But also just noting, that there's some information, there's some questions here about how to get in touch, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of these slides with the contact information for those learning hubs, Gavin, with everyone, so that we're able to point people in the right directions. But Vu, over to you if you have anything you'd like to add before I know you do have to get running.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a few things that we can share, details in terms of how are we responding to the countries who are currently facing the crisis. And we are hoping through the learning hubs and many other platforms that this information can be shared as well if there's more details needed. For example, we now have countries that we have put on our radar, and we are working with UNAIDS to assess the legal implications of those draconian laws for service delivery. And that will give us an idea in terms of what kind of support would be needed, or maybe adjustments in our crisis management as the Global Fund in human rights challenging context. So that's the first thing. We are revising the protocol to ensure that we are ready for all these types of really bad laws that are coming, and in anticipation that maybe what we have might need to be intensified in how we are going to be responding. So that's the first thing that the Secretariat is doing. The second is we're coordinating each other as the Secretariat to ensure messaging is correct. If we are expected to do safety and security where we are classified as an ally, there may have to be different ways in which we are going to be showing up, not necessarily the same as how we are showing up in other countries where we may not have had to be classified as an ally. So specifically an example of Ghana, we went to Ghana to hear from communities on the ground, what are they planning to do in their response, because we can't in Geneva design an approach and support for communities who know best how they want to be supported. We went and did an assessment with the communities. They told us what they needed in the immediate. With the safety and security of services, we've deployed a TA to Ghana, one placed at one of the PRs, one placed at UNAIDS to support communities on the ground. Second, we've asked the KPs in Ghana to give us an idea of their plans and how they are going to consolidate and support each other. And they've just submitted their plans. Now we're going to be looking at that as CRG and see what is within CRG that we can do to support them, what is within our partners and our donors that could support them outside of the grant, and see what can be supported through the grant, where there are resources that could be deployed to support further communities. That is just the example of Ghana. We are also monitoring what's happening in Uganda. We are monitoring what's happening in Kenya. And I know that there was a last meeting in Kenya where certain things were shifting or indication of things shifting. We are monitoring what that means. We want to see evidence if there's going to be deprioritization of communities, cutting of budgets. We are looking at all of those things, shifting participations and representations in CCMs. We are noting all of those things. And if there's any other way in which communities would like us to show up, we are also open to suggestions. If we are not doing adequate response and support and we are not responsive enough, let us know, and so that we can find out. But remember, CRG is not responding to this crisis alone. We are a host secretariat and we have played different roles. There's a role for Peter, there's a role for MS, for our MEX, there's a role for board members, there's a role for departments. And each of us have different voices and influence and political power. And let's use all of who is in the board who is in the secretariat to also add more support to communities, not just CRG, because often that goes to CRG and Linda's department, which is not only our response, it's all of us collectively to also ask the Global Fund difficult questions when we are not doing enough, and ask it at the board, because that's where the decisions must be made. That's where the resources that must follow the decisions that will be made. So that's all I can say in broad stroke. If you want details on what we are doing on the ground, I'm happy to ask Alex or anyone in the team to share more, maybe through the regional hubs or through GFAN Africa, if there's a question from GFAN Africa or GFAN Global or Asia, any other region that wants more details and what are you specifically doing in that region, we're happy to share more.
Thank you very much for addressing that. I think it's helpful as a reminder that it's a whole of Secretariat response, not just CRG, but I do think there's a bit of a communications issue for a lot of colleagues who are wondering what is happening and understanding that, you know, there's not going to be a written plan that anybody's going to share, but maybe there's a way to share some more information. So thank you for your time today, Vu. I know you have to run, but your team remains on the call. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. And we'll look forward to welcoming you back again some other day. Take care. Are there any other questions from this? So just there's a couple of other questions there. And again, we will share the contact information that we have from the slideshows that were just presented as we're able to here in the next day or two after the call. Are there any other questions? There's a comment from Cecilia from Ghana suggesting that the visit from Ghana was good and making a suggestion to CRG. But if there's no other specific questions at the moment, and I'm not seeing any hands raised, I think that we will move on and up. Okay, sorry. There is one hand raised, and I apologize. I'm not sure. Inad, is it from APCOM? Over to you.
Yeah. Hi, good day. Good evening from Bangkok. My name is Inad from APCOM. I am with Midnight, my colleague in Abina, my colleague as well from APCOM. I have two questions regarding the priority of CRG. It was mentioned earlier about the ensuring community leadership at the regional and country level. My question on this point is that how are we addressing the community leadership at the regional level, especially at the implementation of multi-country grants of the Global Fund? Are there any information about like the next round of multi-country grant after this round? And if so, how will this priority of the CRG be like include the support to the regional networks in I mean, I'm talking about Asia Pacific, the regional networks to be active part of the implementation of the next round of multi-country grants? The second point is about the Learning Hub. I know that, I mean, I'm aware that there are different implementers of the Learning Hub, but I'm just wondering if there is any plan for cross learning or cross exchange of information across different learning hubs from different regions, particularly on the status of like legal environments, particularly in Ghana. I mean, the legal environment in Africa is different from Asia Pacific, but there are some benefits of cross region exchange of information, particularly on how the communities at the country level are being supported, or the kinds of technical assistance that are being provided at the country level, and how can this kinds of technical assistance be used from one region to the other. And then the second one is about maybe some details in the Learning Hub. I think one of the points in the presentation earlier is about the TA to the communities in preparation for the grant cycle 8. But are there any plans for the CRG and also for the Learning Hub to also provide technical assistance during the implementation period of the grants approved during the grant cycle 7? The Global Fund has provided information on the phases and steps on the different opportunities for the key populations or communities to engage during the grant application or the negotiation, but there's limited information on what's actually happening during the implementation process, and how can the communities be able to still actively negotiate for their leadership within the implementation process of the grants approved during the grant cycle 7. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
It sounded like 3 questions, but all very important to me.
Okay, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
So I think I will pass it to David to answer the first part of the question around regional engagement and the multi-country grant, the multi-country grant, and then it's probably Gavin, if I can impose, around the Learning Hub sort of questions as well as the TA throughout the implementation cycle. So David, over to you first, and then we'll go to Gavin.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, Ned. Really good to see you. Hi, Midnight. Hi, Dina. Been way too long. Hi, everybody. It's been way too long. Hi, Amina. Hi, everybody. It's a really good question on the multi-country. So there's a couple of things. So one, I think you may be aware or may not be aware, the amount of funding available for multi-countries in GC7 has been significantly reduced. So there's been a 40% cut overall to the allocation for multi-countries for HIV with the focus on key populations across all regions in the Global Fund portfolio. So we're actually, there's been a process internally in the organisation for the last 2 to 3 months to try and work out a best approach forward given the cut in funding. And there's been discussions at the Grant Approvals Committee as well as between CRG and the HIV team, who of course play very much a critical role in the process of identifying and determining kind of what the priorities should be from a Global Fund perspective. What we kind of anticipate, I'm sorry, I can't give you a kind of direct and kind of clear, detailed answer today. What we would expect is over the next 2 to 4 weeks, further information will come out around where we'll be heading with the multi-countries. I would very much hope that across all regions, given that the focus of the multi-country grants is to support key population programming and sustainability and critically community leadership as part of that there are opportunities across each of the multi-country grants at the regional level to engage and support kind of regional networks as well as their constituencies at the country level. But kind of more to come on that, and really happy to kind of follow up with kind of any kind of community representative in any region to talk through what those processes might be in terms of leveraging that funding downstream. Thanks. Sorry, so it's an answer, but not necessarily our answer. Very Global Fund in that.
Thanks, David. Gavin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Inad. Definitely there's opportunity for cross-regional learning. And earlier this week, we had a joint call with all the regional learning hubs. To what we've done is we've mapped initial thoughts that they have for learning. That's going to be bolstered and really grounded in on these needs assessments that are going to happen. And you'll have seen that Seven Alliance has just issued a call for a consultant to help with the needs assessment in Asia Pacific, because although the learning hubs have a level of awareness, we really want to return to country level to sort of see what actual needs are, and we understand that those needs will change over time. So the idea is to have these learning plans, these learning agendas for each region, but then to have a conversation. It was really interesting, the learning agendas, for example, between Latin America and Caribbean and West Africa were very similar, but all happening in different months. So, you know, there's good conversations to have. Is it appropriate to have them in separate months? Perhaps. Is it? But could we also, are there opportunities to have at the same time? And in addition to that, the learning hubs are also considering how they can support translation into languages. And I think that this is something that, you know, has been increasingly useful to ensure that we can ensure accessibility by having multiple languages for these sessions. So all I'm going to say is there's definite opportunity. We would really welcome that opportunity. I think some of the inter-regional learning is super important. I think learning around safety and security, the anti-gender, anti-human rights, anti-LGBTQ backlash is definitely an agenda item that we'd love to see more on. I can't remember the question in relation to TA, but just to say that there are, I don't know if you want to prompt me, otherwise I'll give it.
It was TA through the implementation cycle, like to make sure.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Great question. And it's something that we're really wanting to ensure that the SI is much more attuned to really follow the grant life cycle. So in GC5, TA was previously only available for funding request development. And it was then broadened across the grant life cycle. Approximately just over 0.5% of TA is delivered during grant making, program design, and program implementation. And we really want to see that. And in fact, this moment now to support TA around, but it's around community engagement and implementation. We realize that there is a desperate need to provide implementation support. I think that this is an area that would be really good to focus on in the second half of this year when discussions turn to GC8 design. But in terms of engagement, so engagement in program design, in grant implementation and oversight is available, and we really welcome it. As we move towards the end of 2025, the TA will naturally begin to be more focused around funding request development, but it doesn't exclude other forms of TA. I hope that answers the question.
Great. And thank you both, David and Gavin, for staying on. I think hopefully this is just sort of one of the first kinds of these conversations, and hopefully, Gavin, as you are looking ahead to GC8 and designing that, we can have more conversations in various fora, but also here at GFAN would be welcome. So we are going to just move ahead a bit. I think there's still a few comments that are coming in the chat, but we had two other things we wanted to quickly sort of check in on. So I wanted to just flip the order really quickly from what I said at the beginning and just ask Dumi to speak to us. Dumi is a GFAN speaker if you haven't met them before. But Dumi, over to you. I know you have an exciting podcast series and wanted to let everybody know about that. So Dumi, and then we'll do a quick wrap up around the PPR and the pandemic accord negotiations and where they're at. Over to you, Dumi.
Thanks so much, Katie. Hi, everyone, and apologies. I'm actually using a different device as I just disembarked. But I just wanted to start by something that Vuyiseka mentioned, really around the anti-gender, reproductive, and rights elements. Just to say that it was already seen at CSW 68 just before the GFAN annual meeting, where you already had people who were quite present who would want to oppose, for example, anti-trans by mentioning, elements of bodily autonomy, or even anti-family planning or reproductive rights. And I think, this is important to mention that a lot of these elements were already quite present when America as a state sounded exactly the same as the member state representative from Russia at the 2019 811 UHC. And I think this was obviously repeated again more recently last year. And I think I flagged this in a Stop AIDS blog that introduces the Trans Day of Visibility dialogues. And on that note, I think acknowledging the anti-trans law efforts in the West, sporting codes globally, the anti-LGBT laws, I think this was quite important for us to just be able to bring some of the different issues. I think also from a lens of, what would I call it? A lens of South-to-South solidarity. And so we captured perspectives from South Asia, the Caribbean, Latin America, East and Southern Africa. And I think this is quite important because it does in a lot of issues, not just in the HIV response, but also acknowledging some of the gaps in terms of economic empowerment or disposition to navigate socioeconomic inequities that trans and gender diverse folks, experience. But then also just speaking to the broader issues across the feminist movement, decolonial framing, language, and naming of issues that are relevant to queer movements. And I think also just bringing about certain elements that aren't often spoken about, even within the HIV response. And so reshaping some of our narratives around joy and trying to figure out, do we still want to sit within the, the nexus of development, needs and challenges, or full liberation? And so I think for us, it was really a key moment to just be able to unpack a lot of those different issues, and also speak to some elements of solidarity where, there are humanitarian and crisis issues, because they are all intersecting. I think that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dumi. It's great to have you here, and we have the links in the chat to both the where your podcast is and to some of the articles, or the Shop Age one that you were referring to, the blog. So thank you so much. We're just going to move ahead with a quick update. Conte, I'm just going to pass it over to you for a quick update around the pandemic accord.
All right, thanks a lot, Katie. So it's an exciting prospect. I have 3 slides and approximately 3 minutes. So let's see if we can fit everything in. The answer is we can't. I'll be very quick. So hi everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I couldn't remember last time we did this actually. An update on the pandemic accord, and looking back, couldn't actually find the date. So I have a little bit of background on what the pandemic accord is. On screen now. Just a quick reminder that it's a process that was launched at the end of 2021 and was meant to end next month in May 2024. So a draft was meant to be produced by an international negotiating body. They have had 9 meetings, and they were supposed to finish their work now so that they could present a final draft to the World Health Assembly next month. This was in theory. In practice, the negotiations haven't really stalled. That's not they are progressing. They're progressing more slowly than expected. There's been some progress from a first a first zero draft came out in February 2023. That was good but complicated because he had everything and absolutely everything in it. It was covering a lot of grounds. And it was clear that a lot of things were going to be dropped. The subsequent drafts were pretty bad. And so now they have started to become interesting again. The reason why we wanted to give that update is we wanted to talk in particular about the pathogen access and benefit sharing system. Because from a funding of global health perspective, it's an interesting system. It's unclear whether it will actually take place, it will actually be implemented as described in the latest draft of the accord. But in theory, this is how that PABS system is supposed to work. Each state would choose how they want to implement that system, but they would mandate or incentivize companies to contribute into the system, so give money. At the same time, whenever a pathogen with pandemic potential would be identified, its genetic information would be entered into central databases. And only companies that have contributed into the system would be allowed to have access to these databases. So the idea is that these private companies would pay for an advantage in developing vaccines, treatment, etc., to fight the next pandemic. And the idea is that the funds that would be collected would be, part of it would be set aside for use in case of health emergencies, so playing a similar role to what the WHO pool fund does. And part of it would be used to fund pandemic preparedness and response efforts in countries. Specifically, we focus on surveillance, so helping low and middle income countries to meet their obligations under the pandemic accord. So it's an interesting system because it potentially creates a parallel funding system to the Global Fund Pandemic Preparedness Funding, to the Pandemic Fund, and honestly, we don't really know what to think about it. It feels like duplication, but at the same time, it is innovative in the way that it would gather funds. So we thought we should alert members of the GFAN network that this is on the table, and the timeline for this to pass or break is the next couple of weeks. very quickly, and I will hear more from Courtney on this, but how to engage into these discussions, because the Accord is mostly negotiated behind closed doors. It's quite hard to engage. A few organizations have, including Stop AIDS, including AVAC, including Frontline AIDS. I've managed to organize a parallel meeting with negotiators, which are a way to influence the conversations, but the negotiations themselves are happening behind closed doors. So the most obvious way to influence is through your governments. And there is one additional and very special challenge for civil society in this case, which is that it's been partially hijacked by conspiracy theorists who think the WHO is trying to take over the world. It's extremely funny, but it's also really not, because what that means is that every time we try to make a point in public, in open conversations, immediately after and before us, people are claiming that they are chips in the vaccines or whatever. So it's a real problem. It really makes us look bad as civil society and lose credibility. We're also running a series of parallel conversations. So it's with GFAN, Stop AIDS, Frontline AIDS, AVAC, and a number of others are getting together every 2 weeks to talk about PPR, and specifically over the past few months, we've been talking a lot about the pandemic accord. If you want to join us, if that interests you, get in touch with me and we'll get you onto the invite list. What did I forget, Courtney? The floor is yours.
No, that sounds great. I just wanted to add the new text is expected to be sent to member states and relevant stakeholders by the 18th of April. And so very happy to share that. Politico also published a copy of the on-screen text, which actually shows the proposed language in which member states are putting that forward. So also happy to share those. And just to highlight, I think one of the other challenges is the human rights language as well. We've seen it weaken each time. And there are some member states who are now proposing that some of that's brought back in around the need to have policies that respect, protect, and fulfill human rights for all people. And so again, as Quentin said, it'd be great to connect with colleagues who are engaging on that so that we can reach out to member states and support and put forward language when we see that version of the text on the 18th. Thanks.
Wow, under 7 minutes. I applaud myself. Thank you so much, Kurt.
Thank you both very much for rushing through that, and thank you to everyone for joining today. Conte has popped in a bunch of links there, but the important thing in what he said was, if you are interested in engaging in more conversations with other civil society colleagues, get in touch with Conte, and he can get you added to that other pandemic preparedness civil society coalition. I think there's a fancier name for it. So I've missed the last slide that says when the next call is, but it'll be 2 weeks from today at the same time. And we'll be sending out notices around that. And just as a highlight, that there is the Global Fund board meeting coming up April 22nd to 24th. It's quite a complicated schedule with both a board retreat and the usual sort of pre-meetings. So we'll probably address that and give you a bit of a heads up on the 17th. And of course, we'll be looking to our colleagues in the delegations and hoping to provide a bit of a debrief for all of you post the board meeting. So thank you everyone for joining today. Again, we've posted the link. We'll share this information online once this recording downloads. And Conte has managed to get some sleep and is awake again for a work day as opposed to 2 in the morning or whatever it is for him. But thank you all for joining. Appreciate it. And appreciate the conversation and discussion that took place in the chat and otherwise today. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everyone, and thanks a lot to Vuyiseka and the team for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.